All right, chapter 1. That art thou. You are it. In studying the perennial philosophy, we can begin either at the bottom, with practice and morality, or at the top, with the consideration of metaphysical truths, or finally, in the middle, at the focal point, where mind and matter, action and thought, have their meeting place in human psychology. The lower gate, the bottom, is that preferred by strictly practical teachers. Men who, like Gautama Buddha, have no use for speculation, and whose primary concern is to put out in men's hearts the hideous fires of greed, resentment, and infatuation. Through the upper gate go those whose vocation is to think and speculate, the born philosophers and theologians. The middle gate gives entrance to the exponents of what has been called spiritual religion, the devout contemplatives of India, the Sufis of Islam, the Catholic mystics of the latter Middle Ages, and in the Protestant tradition, such men as Denk and Frank and Castellio, as Everd and John Smith and the first Quakers, and William Law. So we're going to start in the middle. And based upon the direct experience of those who have fulfilled the necessary conditions, harps on this quite a bit, of such knowledge, this teaching is expressed most succinctly in the Sanskrit formula. Now, this is, I believe, Latin, which I do not speak, but it says Tattvamasi, or that art thou. The Atman, or immanent, eternal self, is one with Brahman, the absolute principle of all existence, and the last end of every human being. One of my favorites. And the last end of every human being is to discover the fact for himself, to find out who he really is. On to page 4. The man who wishes to know the that, which is thou, may set to work in one of 3 ways. He may begin by looking inwards into his own particular thou, and by a process of dying to self. That's ego stuff, right? Self in reasoning, self in willing, self in feeling. Come at last to knowledge of the self. What remains without ego? What is actual being or consciousness or will? Right. Come at last to knowledge of the self, the kingdom of God that is within. Or else he may begin with the thous existing outside himself, and may try to realize their essential unity with God and through God with one another and with his own being. Or finally, and this is doubtless the best way, Huxley thinks, he may seek to approach the ultimate that, both from within and from without, so that he comes to realize God experimentally as at once the principle of his own thou and of all other thous, animate and inanimate, everything. The completely illuminated human being knows, with Law, and he's talking about William Law, that God, and here's the quote, is present in the deepest and most central part of his own soul. But he is also, and at the same time, one of those who, in the words of Plotinus, let's go with that. There we go. Sounds like an old Greek or Roman, right? He says, see all things, not in process of becoming, but in being, and see themselves in the other. Each being contains in itself the whole intelligible world. Therefore, all is everywhere. Each is their all, and all is each. Man, as he is now, man as he now is has ceased to be all. I could see that, I guess, right? But when he ceases to be an individual, he raises himself again and penetrates the whole world. There's going to be a lot of this man, because this is old stuff. And when they said man, they meant everything, kind of like the French have male and female and means, it just doesn't, whatever. This is never going to be an issue, so let's dismiss it now. He, she, they, them, man, woman, God, him, her, itself, nature, all these things. Remember, that's what the perennial philosophy is all about. It's androgynous. Right. The philosophy of the Upanishads reappears, and it's Upanishads or Upanishads, it doesn't matter, reappears, developed and enriched in the Bhagavad Gita, and was finally systemized in the 9th century of our era by Shankara. Shankara's teaching, simultaneously theoretical and practical. Let's stick with the practical and make this accessible, as is that of all true exponents of the perennial philosophy, is theoretical and practical, is summarized in his versified treaty, and I couldn't possibly read this, Viveka Chidamani, the crest jewel of wisdom. All the following passages are taken from this conveniently brief and untechnical work. The Atman is that by which the universe is pervaded, but which nothing pervades or owns, which causes all things to shine, but which all things cannot make to shine. The nature of the one reality must be known by one's own clear spiritual perception. It cannot be known through a pendant, which was a learned man, somebody, an academic. It's like, great, you memorized a bunch of stuff, you're really smart. Similarly, the form of the moon can only be known through one's own eyes. How can it be known through others? Who but the Atman is capable of removing the bonds of ignorance, passion, and self-interested action? The Atman. Somebody who realizes the truth. So the enlightened one, an avatar, a spiritual person, a metaphysics, a mystic. Liberation cannot be achieved except by the perception of the identity of the individual spirit, what you really are, with the universal spirit. It can be achieved neither by yoga, physical training, nor by Sankhya, speculative philosophy. Yeah, speculate, that's how I get it. Nor by the practice of religious ceremonies, nor by mere learning. It's going to be a lot of this stuff. Disease is not cured by pronouncing the name of medicine, but by taking medicines. Deliverance is not achieved by repeating the word Brahman, but by directly experiencing Brahman. We focus on the experience is what he's saying here, right? So the Atman is the witness of the individual mind and its operations. It is absolute knowledge of just what already is, what you already are. There's a lot of this going on. You can find it all over the web, right? The wise man is one who understands that the essence of Brahman and of Atman is pure consciousness, and who realizes their absolute identity. That's the wise man, woman, person, it. The identity of Brahman and Atman is affirmed in hundreds of sacred texts. Caste, creed, family, and lineage do not exist. In Brahman has neither name nor form, transcends merit and demerit. You can't earn it, nor can you lose it. Is beyond time, space, and the objects of sense experience. Such is Brahman, and thou art that. Meditate upon this truth within your consciousness. Supreme, beyond the power of speech to express, Brahman may yet be apprehended by the eye of pure illumination. Pure, absolute, and eternal reality, such as Brahman, and thou art that. Meditate upon this truth within your consciousness. The one, Brahman, is the cause of the many. There is no other cause. And yet Brahman is independent of the law of causation, meaning you can't change what is, even though you are what it is, causation. Such is Brahman, and thou art that. The truth of Brahman may be understood intellectually, but even in those who understand, the desire for personal separateness is deep-rooted and powerful. Ego stuff, right? For it exists from beginningless time. It creates, Brahman is. Brahman, it exists from beginningless time. It creates the notion, so where did this come from, right? Now you're going to talk about the ego and the sense of self. Well, why is that so hard to understand or believe? That consciousness itself created things that evolved consciousness. So there's this debate with some people, or it's like one of two ways of looking at things. Either consciousness arised out of matter, and then it somehow just disappears and dies, or matter arised out of consciousness. Consciousness is what exists at all times and created matter, and then that matter had its own consciousness pop out of it. Well, that makes sense to consciousness. It's like, so I'm conscious. Why wouldn't the things I create be conscious? It literally is what I am. It pervades everything. Right? So anyway, yeah. So that creates the notion, I am the actor, I am he who experiences. This notion is the cause of bondage to conditional existence, birth and death. It can be removed only by the earnest effort to live constantly in union with Brahman. By the sages, the eradication of this notion and the craving for personal separateness. It's called liberation. That's clearly what everybody's looking for. Otherwise we wouldn't be looking, we would have found. It is ignorance that causes us to identify ourselves with the body, the ego, the senses, or anything that is not the Atman. He is a wise man who overcomes this ignorance by devotion to the Atman. When one follows the way of the world, or the way of the flesh, or the way of tradition, example, when he believes in religious rites and the letter of the scriptures as though they were intrinsically sacred, knowledge of reality cannot arise in him. You're focusing on separateness. You're not focusing on what you already are. The wise say that this threefold way is like an iron chain, binding the feet of him who aspires to escape from the prison house of this world. He who frees himself from the chain achieves deliverance. And that's Shankara. It's quite a bit of stuff, right? Let's chew on that for a little while. We'll get back to it.